All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for making the time to come here today to celebrate the new members of the Emeriti. So, starting 3 years ago, we started celebrating the Emeriti, which is something that was not happening at UC Davis, and we do not feel that's appropriate that after working for so many years, the faculty transitioned to the Emeriti, and there are no celebrations to recognize what they did. So I keep saying, and that's honestly my opinion, that they create the platform that make our career so successful here at UC Davis. So we owe to the Emeriti a great acknowledgement for the Emeriti for the work that they did for us, and also we are obliged to keep this university to be at least the same university that we inherit from them, if not a better university. So let's get started here with the celebration. This is the second lecture of the year. We tried different formats. The year one, we did one lecture per quarter. The year two, we did one day with various lectures. And this year, we are doing 2 lectures. One that was in the winter quarter that Alan Boucher, who is here, gave a wonderful lecture, and today we're having the so-called spring quarter celebration with the lecture featuring the Lynette Hart. So this is Lynette is going to be the speaker today, and there is a lot of expectation for the research that she's going to present and the history of her work here at UC Davis since 1984. Like I said, she's the featured speaker. There was a little bit change in the title of the presentation, and everyone who presents and gives this kind of lectures always know that we keep changing the slides and the titles and everything until the 11th hour. So that's not surprising that she made a little change in the title of the presentation. So let's get started, recognize the land.
We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Kachil Dehe Band of Winton Indians of the Colusa Indian Community, Quetzal Dehe Winton Nation, and Yoka Dehe Winton Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands.
All right, so we have the presentation today, and when we put these events together, what was get help from the illustrators and from other people. Here come some ideas, and Steve that's here today, Steve Othering, has worked with us for many years now. He retired from UC Davis, but still very active in terms of illustration. So I want to acknowledge today the illustrations are from Rob Riddle, and we have also here today with us TJ Wishing, that's taking photos of the event here, snapshot. He's a great photographer, so expect very high. And if you want to get a copy of every photo that TJ is taking today, that you put your name and the email address in the attendance list, because that's the only way for me to know who were present and how to contact them. Okay, so make sure that you leave your email address in the attendance list, and then whenever the photos are going to be ready, I'm going to share all of them with you. So this is going to be a wonderful afternoon. We start with this featured speaker, Lynette Hart, and I would like to invite Ben Hart to give you the laudation for Lynette Hart. So it's going to be a family business here. So Ben is going to be doing the laudations. More than an introduction, I asked Ben not to do a standard introduction that we have, because we know Lynette very well. So that would be more like a laudation. Ben, would you come forward, or do you want to do from there? Or come this way here. So I'm going to put the microphone on you, and I'm going to switch the computers.
Well, hi everyone. I was happy to be asked to introduce our speaker, Dr. Lynette Hart. So, where do I begin? you know, she's 85 and been here a long time in the faculty. And so, you know, you got to kind of choose what you're going to say. And what stands out to me, and I'm sure would be to many of our colleagues, is that her devotion to mentoring students in pursuing their dreams in animal behavior or human-animal interactions. And so they have students as well as graduates, and they come into the vet school or they go to another career. So that's been, I think, rewarding for her, and she's going to continue that. I know she's already doing it. And she gets these inquiries from around the world about coming here. So that's probably her real love. But she's also had quite a scholarly journey. The theme that has anchored her work has been human-animal interactions, and she's been a world leader in the area of anthrozoology. And so there was a meeting in UK a few decades ago, and she was one of the world leaders invited to that, and they established the field of anthrozoology, the journal, and she's been with that, led through it, has been the distinguished anthrozoologist, the first one they chose. So that kind of has been the theme throughout 150 papers or so. And so they've been published in standard journals. And so then, as a new field of anthrozoology is getting started, maybe about 30 years ago, yeah, up to 40, they started to get interested in other countries. They were interested in learning more about this field, and so they knew that she was a key player, but that was the days you couldn't necessarily invite a woman to give a talk, to come over. So in some countries, I won't say which ones, they invited me and then asked me to bring her along. Of course, things have changed, and women have become, you know, the principal players of many organizations in the scientific fields and academia and so forth. So that's kind of the changing field. So with that, let me introduce Professor Lynette. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, now I think I'm all dressed. Well, thank you for being here. This has been such an interesting process to think about this long period of time and try to put it in perspective and see what happened during all these years. And I want to start by talking about the earlier part of my life, just to give you some context, because I haven't spent quite half of my year here yet, or of my life. It's been, in a few months, I will have been in Davis for half of my life. I was born in 1938. My parents were just coming off of the Depression. Both of them were still grieving losing a sibling, and it was, in a way, some hard times. My great-grandparents had all been Mormon pioneers and came in to Utah. I knew my grandparents very well because I had all four of them into my 20s. So it was a strong family context. And then in 1941, lots of things happened. My first of 5 brothers was born, and my father decided to come to San Francisco because the new airline industry was starting. And I recently learned that that was true for many of my classmates in elementary school, because we get together twice a year. And they also had come for the new airline industry. But also World War II was underway pretty quickly when I went to kindergarten. We moved about every year, bouncing around. It was pretty chaotic, but my kindergarten teacher invited the class to her wedding in the Stanford Memorial Chapel, which is memorable. And then first grade came along, and one of my strong memories is that as I was sitting there, I looked around the blackboard, all around the blackboard up above were the whole alphabet in printing and cursive. And the teacher passed out the book, Dick and Jane. And I had no knowledge of the alphabet or anything when I started school. But I remember the feeling looking at that book, and I said, I can do this. I really love this environment. And that's been true for my whole life, that I just love the academic environment, and that's sort of how it started. I want to dedicate this to my Aunt Virginia. I'm actually a first-gen student because my parents did not go to college, but my mother's older sister, Virginia, did. And she got married. She actually went to college before she got married. She got married, had a son, Robert, and 2 years after her marriage, her husband died suddenly of septicemia, and she learned she was pregnant. So she immediately got fired from her teaching job because of her pregnancy. She realized that she had to become an earner, and even though she was in a Mormon context where women weren't expected to do that, so she went to Stanford University. My mother actually gave her savings to her to help for a master's, and then she went to Cornell for her PhD in home economics. And she was the founder of a new college of family living at the University of Utah. And as a child, I visited that, and she would show me around. So I learned that it was possible to make your way forward in this way. And it was already in my mind to get a PhD. Well, she retired from the University of Utah very early to go work for USAID. She went to Indonesia, and she had several terms there. For several years she was there, and she would write letters about having dinner with the king and other royalty. She was highly hobnobbing during this stay. And later she had some years in Thailand and Ghana. You see her here in a Ghana outfit. Then she came back. The president of Brigham Young University was heavily recruiting her, and they created a college of family living for her to head there. Well, after she had died, quite a few years later, my only remaining relative from her generation, my Aunt Nona, called my two brothers and had them sit down, and she said, I have to tell you boys something, my third and fourth brothers. And she explained that Aunt Virginia actually had been working for the CIA, and that when she would come back to the States, she would go and meet with Eisenhower before coming home. And that explains so many things. Her second son would never believe it, but it explained a lot of things like her endowing 20 scholarships for students and other things she did. I also want to dedicate it to mice because it was mice that caused me to choose my career. I was going to be a school psychologist, and that was my goal, taking a master's in ed psych, and I was going to take a PhD in that same field. But Gerald McLaren was just starting the new field of behavior genetics.
You make the screen bigger.
Oh, I don't know why it's like that. I think I'm going to leave it. Do you know how to fix it bigger? Great, thank you. So Gerald taught this fabulous course, a summer class, just before he left UC Berkeley, and he had 5 strains of inbred strains of mice, and he had us looking at them, giving them several different behavior tests, collecting data, and then analyzing the data. And that was just intoxicating for me. I thought it was the most wonderful thing. So that is when I decided I had to study behavior. And it was epic timing because that field was totally new, it was just starting. It wasn't even really underway. So if I look back, in those days it was, I was earning my way through college. I went and decided to be a chemistry major undergrad because that was something you would never learn on your own. There were no girls in my class. There was one other girl Marilyn, doing some chemistry. And I loved the chemistry at first, but when I hit calculus, it wasn't fun anymore. And I ran into Marilyn, and she said, well, why don't you just go through physical science education? You can start teaching as soon as you get out. And that's what I did. So I made that shift, and it was the chance event of that conversation with Marilyn. And I graduated in 1958 and started teaching at 19, 7th and 8th grade, first South San Francisco, then Atherton, then Orinda. And it was a really dynamic period when cultural changes were happening. Joan Baez was hitting, in a big way. I was living in Menlo Park then, and her guru was Ira Sandpearl, who hung out at Kepler's Books, and I knew Ira Sandpearl. Just so many things were happening in our culture. I finished up my master's at UC Berkeley in Ed Psych, but while I was there living then in Oakland, it was the Mario Savio days. I would go to the steps of Sproul Hall and see the free speech movement protests. And I also heard that Frank Beach was at UC Berkeley. There was a lot of discussion about that, about his work in reproductive behavior. And the West Coast sex meetings were happening. Ben was attending those. The meetings were for Frank and his students and postdocs. Ben was already a professor, but he would drive down for those meetings. And I didn't know him then. So in 1969, I then had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I started grad school for a PhD, and McLaren was kind to write me an admission letter, and I set the goal for animal behavior in a new lab hosted by Ron Barfield. So it was going to be reproductive behavior of rats, and watching them, I would always say, well, what are they doing? How are they managing it? I would take a class every quarter at the Institute for Animal Behavior with famous people. There it was run by Danny Lehrman. This is Danny, the upper picture. And other phenomenal people were teaching there, like Jay Rosenblatt. And I decided I wanted to pursue ultrasonic vocalizations of rats because it seemed to me something was going on. And in fact, we were able to connect with Donald Griffin, who you see right here, and he was willing to loan us a bath detector so we could start monitoring vocalizations of rats. Very generously, he also invited us over to give a presentation. So very quickly, I was, getting very involved in the conference on reproductive behavior that happened on the East Coast and meeting leaders in that field. And that eventually shifted over to being the Society for Behavioral Neuroendocrinology. So here's my first published paper in Science on the ultrasonic post-ejaculatory song of the male rat. It was fun times. Okay, so after the PhD, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, the Monell Chemical Senses Center, taste and smell, did some work there, and then went to American Cyanamide in household products. Our product that we were working on is still sold. It's Combat. And that was the blue sky work that we were doing in those days. I learned how important writing skills are because they would always call me in to write things. And the group of my grad student friends most of them had not gotten academic jobs. Most of them went to the pharmaceuticals because there were no academic jobs and they were such great writers, they got jobs as technical writers. Well, then I met Ben and we started having discussions across the coast about what would we do? What would we do? So, should he move to the East Coast to a pharmaceutical position, or should I move west? And he said, well, maybe UC Davis will decide to have a human-animal bond center and hire you to direct it. That was the most preposterous thing anyone could have said. But it was just starting. The human-animal bond was just starting. And in fact, there was a conference in 1981 in Philadelphia about that. And Ben said to me, I'll be happy to delay my sabbatical to East Africa if you come out to the West Coast. So I moved in '82, and a month later, Ben is walking in Herring Hall, and the Associate Dean, Bob Hansen, says to Ben, oh, there's some donor that wants to do something in the human-animal bond area. And so basically, a donor dropped out of the sky and was willing to help me do whatever. So, and in a way, I put coattails because when Bob Hansen talked to Ben, of course, Ben said, well, Lynette is interested in that area. So that was the key thing that gave me that start. And I got into the system at the campus in '82, and at the end of the year, we were visiting different other centers in the US, working in this area so that we could plan something different. And I became adjunct professor in the Department of EPM with these famous names like Schwabe and Riemann and all of those people launching the program, the human-animal bond. So something to know about the human-animal interactions area is that it has a very different profile for being supported. Everyone thinks it's a great thing, it creates a lot of media attention, but it's not recognized enough and no one wants to pay for it. So how do you get any academic positions? There were some elderly women who had left bequests, and that's how there was a position at Penn and also one at Purdue. And then the pet industries, Calcan, Waltham, were very supportive, so they supported several labs in Europe, such as Southampton, Zurich, and Cambridge. And they contributed somewhat to my work as well. But really, we were working especially with collaborating volunteers of all kinds, including librarians and artists, as well as students, of course, and my brother. And the campus internal funds were very important, and even conventional grants at times. And then we used nonprofits to travel in a sort of an Earthwatch fashion. UC had one of these programs out of Berkeley called UREP, and that we would get volunteers that would go with us. And then we had many speaking invitations from the veterinary profession, and the pet industry supported us. So that was a way to get around. And then we also used some personal funds. So here this new field is really running out and getting established. Leo Bustad became the real emissary, the worldwide peripatetic traveler, the dean from Washington State, who could talk constantly about the human-animal bond. Ben and I were writing the pet connection through his coattails again. I became the person who did the actual work in editing the proceedings of the conferences held in Minneapolis and Los Angeles. And we also collaborated in writing our book, The Perfect Puppy, which did very well and sent us on some tours around to talk about it. In my department, Calvin Schwabe was there. with writing his epic book, which had a very long chapter on pets and mental health. So he was another exponent. And right away, I started teaching my class on pets in society. It was made available to both undergrads and veterinary students, and I had a research program. So it was all on soft money. This was for 7 years, and so my salary was quite variable. But these were the areas that I studied, these first 3 things. And basically, I continued these 3 areas even until the present. I still work in all 3 of these. First of all, the socializing effects of service dogs, which work got done and published by master's students at Sac State. And pet loss and euthanasia, we arranged with Ben also helping with the contacts with Sac Valley Veterinary Medical Association. We began offering the first veterinary-sponsored pet loss support group. Almost no one came to the group, but it didn't matter. And it was led by psychologists, clinical psychologists. It didn't matter because people wanted to hear about this. There was so much media, and they were happy that the group was there for people who needed it. And we had brochures, but vets wouldn't put it out, and including the VMTH, they didn't want anyone to know that pets died in their practice. So it's a huge cultural shift. And then pets in housing, because California changed its law and required that elderly people in state-assisted housing be allowed to have pets. So we went around to find out how that worked. Well, the field was really galloping along. The reason it got so much mobility was from the paper by Erica Friedman in 1980 when she was a grad student. It had just under 100 subjects, but it showed that people who had pets were more likely to survive heart attack. That woke up people in the medical field, and so NIH had a technology assessment workshop, and I was part of that session. So things were really moving. And then the other thing was, of course, Ben wanted to go to Africa. We had a close friend, Dale Lott, who worked in wildlife, and he was Mr. Bison, the world authority on bison, and we met every week for lunch, so we'd talk about what we're going to do. So we planned that we would go together to Rwanda because there were a lot of topi there. And we had heard, by way of Dick Estes, who is the big field biologist of Africa, that topi did not perform flamen. That was so curious. So we took a trip to New Hampshire to meet with him, and then Dale made plans for 4 of us to go there, including my former technician from when I was at UPenn. And we were basically living outside but sleeping in a small trailers at this site. But the study site was Akagera Park. That was the most epic place to be. It occupied 11% of Rwanda at that time. It's no longer that big of a percent. And we were led by the 2 professors or PhDs who monitored that park. They got us in there. There was a huge plain, and all the male topi would stake out their little territory, and the females would go out in the morning to browse and then come back in the evening and pick which male they were going to stand there with. So we were able to do those observations. And then we went, after Rwanda for 3 months, we went down to Kenya for 3 months and collaborated with university people for anatomical specimens. In the upper image, you can see a more typical dental pad from a Grant's gazelle with an incisive papilla, which leads, excuse me, leads to the vomer nasal organ. But when we looked at the dental pad from topi, there was no incisive papilla. There was no access from the dental pad up to the vomer nasal organ. So there was no point for a topi to perform flamen, which is what we had observed. When we were in Kenya, we also stayed at Elsamere, the home. Do we have something? Oh, that's good. I've got some. The home for Joy Adamson. Joy Adamson had raised Elsa, the lion. She was famous, and she had recently died. So her home was being converted to a research facility, and Dale found out about it. So we were the first scientists to go there. And the caretakers for Elsamere were charting out a way to make Hell's Gate, which was right nearby, into a national park. So we could go into Hell's Gate, just driving our Suzuki Jeeps, and look at these different species. And we found that the eland, the Thompson's gazelle, the Grant's gazelle, all performed flamen, and we described how that was. But the topi and the hartebeest, the alcelophan antelopes, did not. And they ignored urine of females. So that was the flamen. We finished getting so much data so quickly by bringing volunteers from Europe. And they would come for 2 weeks. They'd have 1 week at Elsamere and 1 week at Masai Mara. It was really epic timing because it was very affordable. There wasn't a boom of tourists in those days, and we could train up the volunteers in 10 minutes or something to make their 10-minute observations. They'd drive out in pairs in Suzuki Jeeps, do the observations with a recorder, and we collected lots of data in which we found on the upper image that a hartebeest would go up to the female's rump and stretch his neck, but he wasn't sniffing her. He was just saying, are you going to stand there and let me mount? And this was quite different than the gazelle. In this case, he was provoking her to urinate. She urinates, and then he investigates the urine and performs flamen with the lip curl. So we wrapped up that, and we had been there for 2 years, but we sat there as we were finishing up the perfect puppy, and we said, oh my gosh, we want to keep coming to study these animals. What can we study? And we focused on grooming, which is something that they all do. So we looked at the list of antelopes that you see there and documented that it had to do with preventing ticks. And if you look at these images, you see the other thing we found, which was that impala, who spend a lot of their time in browse, in bushes, where there are so many ticks, they would do a tit-for-tat exchange. So one impala would go up to another and lick it 5 times, and then the other one would lick the partner back, and they would exchange tit-for-tat, and we did a lot of work with that. We also went to Namibia to study the black-faced impala grooming and looked at some captive antelopes in Zimbabwe. Well, another thing that we were doing in these years was lecturing to veterinary associations. And generally, Ben would be the one getting invited because he was the grandfather of veterinary behavior, and behavior was just taking off. In the initial days when we would go to AVMA, behavior would be at some off-site facility. You'd have to take a bus to that little room because people didn't care about it. But 5 years later, behavior was the big featured thing, and it would be a huge room that was filled. So there was great demand to learn about behavior problems and how to treat them, and Ben was doing much of the research that provided that field. And then I was doing the human-animal interactions, and we became a kind of pair giving these talks. And some of them were sponsored by Waltham or the Pet Food Institute, and some by veterinary associations. This is our first trip to Japan in 1986, and they would bring over the people and then translate the presentations and publish them in Japanese as a way of educating in specialties. So that was my part-time start on this campus. But then I had a 16-year period where I was full-time, and that started in 1990. This was a period of very turbulent activity in animal welfare nationally in the United States. I was living in New Jersey in the mid-'80s, or the early 80s actually, the early 80s, and I saw the start of these protests because people were marching around the Museum of Natural History in New York every day, and it was front page news. They were objecting to Lester Aronson using corrosive substances on the eyes and ears of rabbits. And it was a hot topic. So those protests led to the revision, the major overhaul of the Animal Welfare Act. And that was kind of a national movement. People knew about it. And so in the late 80s, when UC Berkeley wanted to build a new lab animal facility, David Roberti said, oh, you can't do that unless you create a center for animal alternatives. And they had a big blue ribbon committee that designed this center. The blue ribbon committee wanted a $400,000 annual budget, but no budget was provided by the legislature. So it ended up being funded by the UC Office of the President for $100,000. So this new position was offered here with Dean Rohde supporting. He was the only dean who wanted it. So that's where it came. And the advertisement was made, and I prepared very carefully for that position in interviews. And all the other applicants were full professors with full ladder rank positions, but I had no ladder rank position. My folder went forward from the department because I was so many years out from my PhD by now, and I had a lot of publications. My folder went forward for associate professor with a full FTE, but it was actually ended up being a low-level assistant professor with only 50% FTE. But I was paid full-time because of the academic administrator position. So I had my budget, $100,000, so about half of it went to half of my salary. And I had some money there, which I used to hire a librarian about half-time. And I had known David since I came here. David Anderson was really interested in human-animal interactions, and he had started very systematically keeping track of the literature, the research. It was all over the map. It was published everywhere. It was so hard to find. There were no keywords that anyone could use to search. So the same year that I hired him on recall, he started a quarterly journal called the Interactions Bibliography, where he selected 30 keywords and published all the abstracts of all the papers that were appearing in each of these fields. So he sort of defined the field, but he also was a big help in creating animal alternative activities. And I learned about the wonderful value of collaborating with librarians. They're like magical people because they like to help you find what you need. And here's Joanne Borkman, thank you. So we get together every year. David is about 92, is it now? He just turned 92. He lives in Rockland, and we'll be having lunch next week with several librarians because we do that every year. And so after David, I couldn't hire him anymore. Mary Wood came, and even when my funding ran out in 2006 Joanne kept paying Mary, so we continued doing some work. And now I collaborate with Eric Fossack, who is the current librarian. And here's an example of what the task was for librarians, because it was a fire hose of research literature. And the librarian could help you find exactly what you needed. I love this image from Steve, who's right here. And I think it conveys the picture much better than words. So one thing we did was go around and visit all the UC campuses, meet with their IACUCs, and help them understand the idea of working with librarians so that effective searches for alternatives could be made, because it is a provision of the Animal Welfare Act that you need to search for alternatives to anything that is causing distress. And you can see that every campus had unique requirements, because 4 of them or so had medical schools. We had also a vet school, and some campuses specialize in amphibians and some in marine mammals. So the particular requirements for each campus needed to be personalized with a librarian who was there. So we were providing research and leadership with regard to animal alternatives and welfare, and I had always targeted refinement, that is making the animal more comfortable 24 hours a day, and also animal use in education. Whereas other centers focused on alternatives were all focusing on toxicity testing. Well, that's not relevant to a college campus anyway. We were able to make, and we're making big strides like other vet schools, to have better alternatives that were created. Well, we also spearheaded the Virtual Heart, which was a really brilliant software CD that was designed for high school but was used in veterinary education, with our fabulous software people that were being headhunted from Silicon Valley, but they stayed here. We had a lecture series, which we published in a book. We published a book on alternatives in education focused on dissection, this book right here. And then we created search templates so people could easily search the literature for refinement and resources in general. The campus was a big leader in using plastinated specimens, so we could spread information about all of these breakthroughs, as paradoxically we were stopping the interventive uses of animals in education, in veterinary education, but the 8th grade teachers in California and the US were still doing as much dissection and really loved doing it because they felt the students were more excited, as Emma Grigg worked with me on a study of that. So the culture was changing. Many people were banding together to advocate for better treatment of animals. Well, 1990 was also a big year for the human-animal interaction, excuse me, human-animal interactions. And in 1990, we organized ISAS. And you'll see the original founders, 6 of us, at UC Davis, Ben and me, at Pennsylvania, James Serpel, in Maryland, Erica Friedman, and then 2 in Europe up above. Those were the founders. 5 of the 6 founders were people who studied animals and were located at veterinary schools. Only Erica was at a nursing school. And then when we started adding fellows, you can see some of the people who became fellows. So it was an international group. During these full-time years, I continued studying the same things I had studied from the beginning, but in new ways, but the topics were the same, and these were mostly very low-cost projects, sometimes that were led by students that I was mentoring. With regard to service dogs, they were exploding around the United States, and it was becoming more of a free-for-all, as you saw here. I think this picture illustrates that. Ben and I also continued our field research, and our friend Dale Lott in 1990 had a project in Nepal where he was going to see how much it disturbed rhinos when tourists would ride around in Chitwan Park and look at the rhinos. They'd be riding around on the elephants. So we were riding an elephant. We saw an elephant grab a branch, like you see here, and start switching for flies. And we looked at each other and said, we have to come back to study this. So that's kind of another special chance event, because we were busy with that at Chitwan, and then later in India at Nagara-Holi National Park, studying tool use. And at these locations, I took advantage of the human-animal interactions to learn about the mahouts by interviewing them through translators, to learn about their perspectives and what their elephants liked, and various other things, and published that. So we demonstrated and learned that switching increased when more flies were out. Elephants would change a switch that was too big to make it into a better switch. Wild elephants, and also semi-captive ones, did the switching, and also little baby elephants, without any tutoring, immediately knew how to do it. Well, my fourth of 5 brothers was a geophysicist, and his job was doing seismic recording. He worked for Mobil Oil, and then he started building his own earth measuring instruments. So I knew all about seismic recording and that he could do that. And just also, we were just interested in vocalizations because I had studied ultrasounds. I wanted to know more about infrasounds that elephants made. So we arranged to go down to Bucky Steele's compound. And Bucky was a famous circus guy that had been really well known for training his bull elephant and other elephants. His bull elephant named Buke, that he had raised from a baby. And Buke was at his site in a small cage, and he said, if Buke had any chance, he would kill me in an instant. So he knew that. But anyway, my brother kindly came with his van. We arranged to work at Bucky Steele's compound where he had a couple of elephants. And you can see the elephants are over here. And there was 10 meters from them to where we had a geophone and a microphone. And then Byron's cables went out 30 meters to another geophone and microphone. And in his van, he had multiple channels of recording. He also wanted to know if he went to a really quiet area where there wasn't a lot of seismic noise, like Winnemucca, Nevada, out in the field there, what would it look like? How far would the seismic propagation go? So Dale, always traveling with us, got his little airplane and flew us from Davis to Winnemucca, and he was the heaviest man, so he did the jumping, and Byron did the recording to see how the Rayleigh waves went. So that was quite a bit of publication that we did, and of course we wanted to know with wild elephants what would happen when we did playbacks, and this was all work that was facilitated by my student, Caitlin O'Connell, and also Jason Wood was part of this. So, and we did playbacks both at Etosha in Africa and at Negarahole in India. Well, in 2006, I was notified that the Office of the President would no longer support the UC Center for Animal Alternatives. So I lost that 50% position. But it was really a kind of gift in disguise because it's pretty sustainable and not that difficult to be half-time. And that's the reason I ended up staying such a long time. So we just continued with the same research topics, working with a lot of students and pretty minimal grants. And we started doing more international leadership and lecturing, really major visiting professor positions around the world, and particularly in Grenada and the Caribbean. And I set the goal of targeting some areas that were really ignored, that you could hardly find anything on, and I targeted those for research topics in Frontiers, open access journals, these 5 topics. And these all became ebooks. The last one was the final one, Effective Options Regarding Spay or Neuter of Dogs. And we finished that one last year as I retired. So I was also teaching my class all these years, Pets in Society, and it was the PHR 106 was the undergrad version. And in various ways, we also made it available for veterinary students as 406 until 2013, when the curriculum was changed. And after 2013, I would still give some lectures here or there, especially in behavior. So some of this was still coming to the vet students. And of course, the number of undergrads wanting to take the course kept increasing over these years. And this is just an example of one of my lecture titles. And many undergrads were coming to me and saying, I want to learn more about human-animal interactions. How do I do that? And as a response to that, we created a website to show them how they could put together their own program, their own major and minor that would be foundational with a human major and an animal minor, or vice versa. They could start getting qualified or learn more about it. And we listed faculty that were working in this area and also courses that were relevant. That's called the WAG site. And research was still ongoing. It was facilitated by Mariko Yamamoto coming to Davis for 5 years, largely on her own funding. Emma Grigg came from the Caribbean, and we did quite a bit as well. You'll see we were focusing on decisions that pet owners make. So you'll see something about the household noises, but also the spay and neuter issues. Well, something else happened in 2017. There was the first case on service dogs that went to the Supreme Court. Elena Fry, as a kindergartner, had gone to school. She had cerebral palsy, pretty extreme, and she said, I want to bring my dog to school. And the school said, no, you don't need your dog. You have an attendant, a human attendant. You have no need for a dog. This was not acceptable to the Fry family. And so they pulled her out and sent her to a different school, but kept fighting. And this was like when she was in about 8th grade, I think. It made its way to the Supreme Court. And the brief that was prepared cited the work that we had done in the mid-'80s on school playgrounds, observing children who had a service dog with their wheelchair and children who did not have a service dog. And it was very clear cut that the children who had a service dog had more friendly approaches on the playground and more smiles Never mind that there were only 5 such children who had those service dogs. It's a good example. Sometimes you don't need a big N. It was good enough for the Supreme Court. They sent the case back to the lower court and said, basically, remember that the federal law overruns the lower policies or principles. So they was a kind of tutorial that they sent back to the lower court. Well, one day I came home. Ben was out of town for a couple of days, and our dog Ginny, our second Aussie, was behaving so oddly. She would just hide for me. She wouldn't come in the house. She stopped eating anything. So on the 4th day, I took her to emergency. She would eat a little snack at the VMTH, but it was quite a mystery. And then I picked up Ben at the airport, and when we came into the house, it's a different part of the house than where we spend most of our time, we heard the smoke alarm beeping, and that's when she ran away. So we knew the smoke alarm was making her really crazy. This led to a whole endeavor for a couple of years on studying dogs' responses to household noises, and Emma Grigg ended up being first author on that paper, which got a lot of attention based on analyses of what web posts people had made about their dogs. Sadly, most people thought it was funny, their reactions, their dogs' reactions to something like the microwave or the smoke alarm beeping, but it's obviously very distressing to the dogs. But then we also undertook this really large project that was triggered by Niels Peterson. He ran into Ben one day, and of course Ben and I both worked in reproductive behavior, hormones. We knew all about the importance of hormones. And Niels said to Ben, maybe it'd be good if you'd look and see what the effects are of neutering dogs at different ages. And there were things in the literature about that, but nothing that a practitioner could really use to make decisions. It was too general. So we started looking at that. And we also had data from interviews of veterinarians. So we had in the works another perfect puppy book, which we delayed publishing until we got data on spay-neuter. Well, this was part of a new spay-neuter topic, as I had already mentioned. That topic currently has 2.7 million views. So we learned from this project that people really care about their dogs, and they will beat bushes, they will go anywhere to get information that might help them with their dogs. So here's a page from the new Perfect Puppy, which was based on interviews of 168 veterinarians. This is for the golden retriever. You can see it's highly trainable, and it has high demand for affection and very low on all the aggressive traits. So really a happy family breed. We also had 10 different behaviors, and we ranked all the breeds for those 10 behaviors. This is territorial defense, and you can find whichever breed of the ones we had ranked listed there. Well, for the spay-neuter work, we started with golden retrievers because they're so popular, and published this first. You can see that intact males and females, about 5% of them have joint disorders, musculoskeletal disorders. But if they're neutered at less than 6 months, it goes up 3 to 5 times. And there's also problems with cancers. So that was Golden's. We later looked at Labradors, German Shepherds, and then we said we better look at as many as we can. We published for 35 breeds, and then we mopped up with a final paper last year with guidelines for 40 breeds. And we had also done a mixed breed analysis where we found that dogs over 20 kilos or 44 pounds are more likely to have joint disorders. Well, we were also carrying on with animal welfare and alternatives, helping people select appropriate animal models, and we did a study, Emma and I, on clay models versus cat dissection. How do they compare if you're teaching high school students human anatomy? And then in Korea, they were moving ahead with all of their processes for iacooks and alternatives, and I was off to the side working with them. And we continued working with librarians. Steve Bartold and I launched a new course for 10 years on mouse behavior and biology. A few students were interested in that, so it was really a treat to work with Steve. And it was at the time that he was the chief editor of the group that was editing the new guide for the care and use of laboratory animals. So very dynamic period to be working with him. And that's the version of the guide that is still in effect, published in 2011. So, and then general leadership during only working half-time. So I was on AVMA committees. There's a Pets in Housing steering group, editing for several journals and doing more visiting professorships and giving more lectures and media interviews, which the interviews keep going on into retirement. Dale was in his final period of life, but he was coaching us as the NSF grant was going in. And then several other students worked with me for elephants and the giraffe flamen project, and hippo yawning isn't published yet. This is a very exaggerated example, and you would probably never see one that's this exaggerated. But there's a yawn, and when I would show it to students, even a class of 100, for the first few years, they would have no idea what that behavior was. Brian Greco was a zookeeper. We met him at a behavior meeting, and we said, go back to your zoo in San Diego and look at them as they're waking up in the morning and see if you can see them yawning. And 2 weeks later, he sent us some videos. But no one had ever reported yawning in elephants. So now this is from, look at the one that's getting up over in the corner. And there she is. She is yawning right now as she wakes up. We learned that that's when they do it. We're working with captive elephants in southern South Africa. And this is an example of contagious yawning. Again, one of them is waking up. And they're both yawning. The lower one yawned first. And we wanted to know, would they yawn in response to a person? So after about 6 yawns, the likelihood of an elephant yawn increased. With regard to giraffe, flamen had been reported in giraffe, but not carefully scrutinized. So we scrutinized and observed many cases of it. The male would come up to the female, kind of usually maybe touch her rump, and she would shift her posture so that she was braced. She was braced well. Then she would urinate, and he would put his muzzle right in the stream and get a big mouthful. And then he's already starting to perform flamen there. And then he raises his head way high in the air. And we also demonstrated an anatomical alteration with regard to the giraffe. So something we haven't published yet pertains to hippo yawning. And we were going on the idea of what we learned in Zambia, which is that the hippos yawn at the end of the day when they've been laying in the water all day, their heads are hot, and they're kind of waking up, and we thought they had to cool their brain, because that's when they would all yawn and then go out to forage all night. But then when we went down to South Africa, where it's very cold, they were still yawning. So it's not because of brain cooling, it's something about just activation and waking up. So I have one more research project that I've laid some groundwork for, and I haven't quite rolled it out yet, but that is pertaining to human factors in pet obesity. Isn't it shocking that a majority of dogs and cats are obese? It's terrible for their health. Why are people overfeeding their pets? And people are studying nutrition of pet food, but they're not studying why pets are obese. So Frontiers in Veterinary Medicine is very interested to have this be a research topic, and I have some co-editors that would like to do that. And a number of leading veterinarians whose names you would recognize said, oh yes, I would like to write a perspective on that. So this is another project that we'll be launching maybe by fall. So this is my final slide, kind of summarizing. I think my work is very different than most people. It's not one track that filling out the whole branch on one big question, but there's sort of a general trend to be looking at different aspects of social relationships, including sensory bases of communication. I think my experience has been that less conventional pathways can work, and sometimes important opportunities show up that are very accidental but make a huge difference. Having a way to recruit resources is really important. Most of my students were extremely quirky, but very committed and clear that they wanted to do field research, and they have found jobs working in field research, even though such jobs really don't exist, and that's where most of them are. So they've found their way to position. Mentoring makes a huge difference for a few students, so it's important to have that available for some of them. And many of the jobs that someone might get or might want are not off-the-shelf jobs. You could create your own job. And I mentioned I have the 5 brothers, and the first one was profoundly retarded, and when autism came along, we realized that that was a part of his issue. And the autism and the Asperger traits are sort of rampant in my family. So all of my brothers have found jobs where they can work all alone late at night, because that's when they do their best work. And it can be an advantage in excelling in some tasks that other people don't want to do. Sometimes lady luck can play a role, and I gave you some examples of that. And I always like Steve Forbes' statement that you don't stumble on something if you're not walking around. So I appreciate you coming to this talk and being here. Thank you so much, and we'll turn it back to Walter.
All right, so now it's time for some reflections and tributes to Lynette Hart. Let's start with Margie. Margie could not be here today, but she sent a note, congratulations, and all my best wishes for this new chapter in your distinguished career and life.
Today, we celebrate the incredible career of someone who has left a lasting mark on UC Davis and far beyond. My friend, my mentor, and my colleague, Lynette. For decades, Lynette has been a guiding light at the School of Veterinary Medicine. Her passion for the human-animal bond and the complex relationships we share with animals has inspired students and researchers around the world. Through her work, she reminds us that our connection with animals requires passion, empathy, and understanding. She's mentored many students, many of whom have gone on to do amazing things themselves. She's listened, she encourages, and she empowers and makes everyone in her realm seen and heard. Her contributions have shaped how we think about our animal companionship, how we think about therapy and service animals, and the bridge between humans and animals. She continues to bring people together across disciplines, cultures, and across the world, and helps us all see animals have something that deeply impacts us. Lynette's legacy is undeniable. Her warmth, her brilliance, and her heart have left an imprint on me personally, as well as all those who have been lucky enough to know her. As she tips her toe into the next chapter, not fully retiring perhaps, I wish you joy and continued adventures, because someone like you will never stop inspiring those around us. Again, warmest wishes, and thank you for everything, Lynette.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to say a few words on Professor Lynette Hart's behalf. I am a veterinary epidemiologist currently working at University College Dublin, and Lynette was my major professor between 2000 and 2006 when I did my doctoral studies at UC Davis. Boasting is generally never good. However, I have to confess that when I speak with my colleagues about mentoring and mentorship, I always tell them that I've had excellent mentors, that my major professor still checks up on me and would even be interested to know how well I sleep at night. There are 4 things that I think I wish to share this afternoon about Lynette's mentorship of me that helped me to study well while I was at UC Davis. First, I always felt that she cared for my entire self. A kind and consistently caring person. Lynette's care for me went beyond my academic self to encompass the well-being of my wife and my children, and even to my mother back in Jamaica. Second, she was able to appreciate the value of incorporating my cultural background into my studies. And so she allowed me, or facilitated my collecting data in Jamaica as a part of my doctoral research. Third, she created a mentorship context that favored my doing well, advising me who to choose for my dissertation committee, and thus ensuring that I had a group of persons who worked harmoniously together, but who also had all the essential skills that allowed me to get the guidance that I needed. And fourth, Lynette gave me a good feeling about what I wanted to research. When I first spoke with her, I remember telling her that I wanted to study the effects or to research the effects of dog bites, of human-animal interactions on dog bites. She said immediately that she would be my major professor. I countered by pointing out to her that we had a logistic problem, that she was not a member of the graduate group of epidemiology and she needed to be. She said she would join. Now, I don't know how many doctoral students have a major professor who joins a department or a graduate group just because of them. But for me, who didn't even know how to write or to create a hypothesis, this was a vote of confidence in my abilities and a confirmation that my thoughts and my ideas had a lot of value. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a brief insight into my experience as Lynette's graduate student. I became an epidemiologist at UC Davis. I thank God for the opportunity to have studied there. I have benefited from this opportunity, and I think very highly of the experience. Lynette, thank you and congratulations. Thank you to the committee for having conferred this honor on her. And thank you for honoring me by giving me an opportunity to say these few words on her behalf.
All right, so Teresa still would not be here, and she sent a note. Dear Lynette, I'm disappointed that I will not be able to attend your lecture, as I will have already left for some field work. I want to express my appreciation for meeting you and the others through the WAG Anthropology group. So many interesting conversations. I wish you all the very best for your next adventures.
I'm Mariko Yamamoto from Keio University of Science in Japan. I used to work as a postdoctoral scholar under Dr. Lynette Hart. On the occasion of Dr. Lynette Hart's transition to Professor Emeritus, I am honored to send you this video message in recognition of your extraordinary contributions. Your tremendous contributions to the development of human-animal interaction have had a great impact, not only in the world, but also here in Japan. You and Ben have visited Japan many times to give lectures to us. Japanese researchers in this field have always been aware of and greatly influenced by your research. Your dedication and pioneering research have contributed to a better understanding and deeper bond between people and animals. Your contributions have inspired countless researchers and people who have benefited from animals in many ways. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for your valuable work and wish you continued success in your endeavors.
Dan Anderson, how are you doing these days? On the 16th, I will be, where else? Be in Baja chasing pelicans with my daughter Helen. My best to you and Ben. Joanne is here in person.
Lynette, I didn't know that you were going to be highlighting librarians at this presentation, but we've certainly enjoyed working with you, and it's been just a pleasure working and helping all of your students and sharing our I guess, library expertise as we've gone through many iterations as the world has changed, and seeking information and finding information has gotten much more complex. I had the privilege of working in the MPVM program with the students, so I had a good idea of some of the things that you were doing, but I'm so glad that Dave Anderson, who is amazing, and Mary Wood really took things to a different level while I was still at the library. And they have continued, I think, with Eric to provide the veterinary school with a level of support that is really not so available everywhere else. So thank you, Lynette, for giving the opportunity to the librarians to really shine in that, and your work with the animal behavior, human-animal behavior is really wonderful. We really appreciated that. And I'd like to say that this presentation, we should just take this presentation and put it on the Emeriti Association's Video Records Project, except it's a little too long. So we hope that you will do an interview for us for that project, which is one of the reasons I'm here, is to promote that. Because we really want to hear the stories of so many Emeriti and their contributions to the university that have enriched the university as well as their own lives while you've all been here at UC Davis. Since I'm here with the microphone, we have some information about the Video Records Project at the back with the refreshments and brochures on activities that the Emeriti Association does on this campus and system-wide. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Joan.
Hi, Lynette. Congratulations on your retirement. What a phenomenal career you've had. The diversity of research questions and study systems you've worked on is absolutely astounding. You made fantastic contributions to our understanding of the behavior of both domestic and wild animals, and your work has had an impact on the lives of so many people, including your students. It was such an honor and a pleasure to be your graduate student way back when, and I wish you a wonderful and restful retirement.
Christina Moya could not be here and send a note, sorry to miss your talk, and thank you for all your efforts developing the anthrozoology here at UC Davis. Susan King, thank you, Lynette, for all your contributions to animal research and welfare. I'm sure they will continue, as will your positive influence.
Hello everyone, my name is Suring Liu, and even though I've graduated twice since I first met her, I still proudly consider myself one of Dr. Lynette Hart's students. It is my great honor to contribute to her welcome as a UC Davis Emeritus faculty today. I think that all of Dr. Hart's students know all too well how she encourages us to identify and pursue the passions that drive us, which she calls the fire that drives us. She welcomed me just like she welcomed so many others to our community when I was a timid undergraduate. She introduced me to concepts of research and human-animal interactions, and she showed me that I could have a career in science. When I struggled with my grades as an undergraduate, Dr. Hart helped me identify what it was that I needed to succeed and how to access those resources. When I wasn't sure where to go after graduation, Dr. Hart was the first person I went to because she always took the time to figure out what was important to me, and I knew she would help me find a path that was true to my values. She is the reason that UC Davis has been a home to me. Dr. Hart has built such an incredible community of students all around the world, from training shelter dogs into service dogs in Maryland, to guiding guide dog training in Switzerland, to establishing the first service dog facility in Japan. I know that no matter where I go, I can find another one of Dr. Hart's students who have found their fire thanks to her and are improving the lives of people and animals. Dr. Hart may have helped us find the fire that drives us, but she has always been the light illuminating our path forward. Thank you so much, Dr. Hart. We are all better for knowing you. Congratulations.
Sharif was not able to be here and send congratulations on a great career, Lynette. We are all proud of you, wishing you the best of health and happiness.
Hi Lynette, it's Daniel Mills here from the UK. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to say a few words to you on this special occasion, and congratulations. You are well and truly the grandmother of the academic field of human-animal interactions and anthrozoology, You've also done an awful lot of fundamental work. In fact, I always find it amusing when I look at your publications and see that amongst the top citations are work on neutering in dogs and its long-term effects, and that's such important work. And I know that's some of your more recent work, but it's really having an impact on the profession. But amongst that, you've got your work on elephant conservation, social acknowledgement of wheelchair users, and rodent vocalizations and sexual behaviour. So you're certainly very talented across a wide range of fields. But these papers not only sort of reflect your ability, but also your compassion for others. You are renowned, I think, globally for your approachability and generosity towards others, and you've always been like that towards me ever since I first met you in the sort of mid-80s when I flew out as a student from the UK looking to learn something about human-animal interactions. And, you know, when I think about those early days and how things have changed, you introduced me to things like the importance of bereavement counselling and pet selection. These things were just sort of starting to appear. And as I said, you've been at the forefront of all of that area while keeping diverse interests in other areas as well. So, as I said, not only have you welcomed me, but you've also welcomed my family. Indeed, my last trip to the West Country, my sons have very fond memories of your hospitality and looking after us so well. And I've always valued our conversations, and I hope that we'll continue them throughout your retirement as well. So best wishes to you all, and wishing you a very successful retirement and also emeritus career. Bye now.
All right, anyone else from the audience here that want to say something? That will be an opportunity now. If not, let's just convene for the coffee and the conversation. There's fresh coffee there in the back. And let's once more time congratulate Lynette for this wonderful career and the wonderful presentation.
Enjoy life?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, definitely doing a lot of traveling, going over to
Oh my goodness, what are you traveling to?
Rwanda and Uganda in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Good, good. You retire? I'm retiring at the end of this month.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So we see part of your work there,
Yeah, a little bit of work from the good old days.
from the old days.
It was always fun to work with Lynette because she always gave me cartoons to do. Kind of like you.
Not
You're a hard worker. Amazing. I don't know how you do it. How many hours do you sleep?
17 years ago, so I still get the old deal. And I have an 11-month contract and things like that.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right.
Old school. My colleagues.
Yeah.
taking off his team. Yeah, thanks for coming. She was very pleased that when you announced that you are going to stand. She sent me an email. Plus one.
It's free. It's a
Going to put this
quiet
microphone
place
here.
for seismic transmission. So elephants don't have other animals creating noise for them, except humans.
Sorry to interrupt. Congratulations,
Thank you
Lynette.
for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
How
you.
can I miss it? Thank you.
Oh, you're sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.